There's a moment in life when you look around and realize you don't have as many people standing next to you as you used to. The calls get fewer, the messages slow down, and the ones you thought would stay, they drift. It's confusing. It's quiet. It feels like maybe you did something wrong. But here's the truth. That silence you're standing in right now isn't emptiness. It's transition. You're not being abandoned. You're being aligned. Because sometimes losing people is the first sign that you're finally finding yourself. Sometimes the silence around you isn't loneliness, it's a sign that you've started growing in ways others can't see yet. You begin noticing that certain conversations don't excite you anymore. The gossip, the complaints, the small talk that once felt like connection now feels like noise. You stop wanting to participate in drama or defend your boundaries to people who never respected them in the first place. That's not you becoming distant. That's you maturing. It's you realizing that peace is more valuable than company that drains it. You start understanding that your energy is expensive and not everyone can afford the new version of you. When you outgrow certain behaviors, you also outgrow the people who still live in them. And that's where the space begins to open. You find yourself sitting alone more often, not because you're unloved, but because you're protecting the love you have for yourself. You begin to see that solitude isn't something to survive, it's something to explore. It's where you start rebuilding trust with your own thoughts. You listen to your heart without interruptions. You remember what you like, what you believe, and what you truly want without the influence of other voices. It's strange at first. You feel like the world shrank around you. You question if you've become cold or hard to reach. But in reality, what's happening is alignment. You're moving from seeking attention to seeking authenticity. The people who were only around because it was convenient for them will slowly disappear when they can no longer benefit from your energy. The ones who only showed up when you were fun, available, or useful will vanish when you start setting boundaries. That's not rejection. It's revelation. You're learning who was truly there for you and who was only there for what they could get from you. There comes a point where you realize not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. Some people were meant to stay in a chapter, not continue into the whole story. And as that circle shrinks, your self-awareness expands. You begin to enjoy your own company in ways that surprise you. You start talking to yourself with more kindness. You begin to notice that your inner voice is no longer filled with criticism. It's becoming gentler, wiser, and calmer. That's not isolation, that's healing. You're unlearning the idea that being surrounded by people equals happiness. You're understanding that being surrounded by peace equals fulfillment. The silence, the distance, the quiet weekends. They're all part of your reset. You're shedding versions of yourself that survived on external approval. You're building new habits that don't rely on being understood to feel confident. You're discovering that growth often feels like loss before it looks like progress. When you no longer fit into the rooms you once did, it doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means your frequency changed, and not everyone is tuned to the same level anymore. Some will try to pull you back to who you were, but your spirit knows it can't fit into that mold again. The lack of friends is just the space being cleared for new kinds of connection. Ones that aren't built on habit, but on honesty. When the noise around you starts to fade, you begin to notice something powerful: your own voice. The fewer people you have to impress, the freer you feel to think and live in alignment with who you really are. There's a peace that comes when you no longer spend your days trying to be understood by everyone. You stop adjusting your tone just to keep others comfortable. You stop explaining your choices to people who already decided not to understand you. When the crowd thins, clarity comes. You realize how much energy you used to spend trying to be liked, accepted, or validated by people who didn't even know the real you. It's not that you suddenly stopped caring. It's that you learned the difference between approval and respect. Approval is temporary, respect lasts. When you start valuing your peace more than your popularity, your entire life changes. You begin to move quieter, not because you're hiding, but because you finally understand that your growth doesn't need to be announced to be real. You learn to enjoy privacy. You find comfort in not having to share every detail of your journey for validation. The fewer opinions in your head, the more room there is for your intuition to speak. The truth is, many people mistake loneliness for independence. But independence isn't loneliness. It's choosing your own direction when everyone else's voice starts pulling you away from it. It's realizing that you don't need a crowd to feel confident in your path. The fewer people you try to please, the more genuine your decisions become. You begin to trust yourself again. You start asking, what do I want? Instead of, what will they think? You notice that you no longer make decisions out of fear of being left out. You make them out of love for where they're heading. That's growth that only solitude can teach. When your circle gets smaller, your standards rise. You begin to value conversations that build instead of break. You find beauty in silence instead of awkwardness. You begin to prefer depth over distraction, peace over presence, and alignment over attention. You stop needing to prove your worth through relationships because you've already proven it to yourself through the strength it took to stand alone. This is when your mind begins to detox. The chatter fades, the judgment quiets, and your focus sharpens. The opinions that once felt so loud now sound like distant echoes. You can finally hear your own thoughts clearly, and they don't scare you anymore. You start to understand that solitude is not about being alone, it's about learning to think independently. You begin to form your own beliefs without needing others to agree with them. You recognize that not every disagreement is a rejection. It's just proof that your path is uniquely yours. You no longer chase validation in places that drain your spirit. You no longer argue to prove a point because you've learned that peace is a better answer than winning. The fewer the voices around you, the easier it is to identify which thoughts are truly yours and which were planted by others. You learn to sit with yourself, to listen, to understand the layers of your emotions without rushing to escape them. This quiet season forces you to face your insecurities and redefine what confidence means. You stop needing to be seen to feel worthy. You stop mistaking company for connection. You realize that the voice in your head that once doubted everything you did now speaks with more calm, more certainty, more truth. That's what happens when you create space between yourself and the noise. You rediscover the sound of your own spirit guiding you towards something real. There are seasons in life that don't make sense at first. One day you're surrounded by people, and the next, it's like the universe has pulled everyone back. It's confusing, uncomfortable, and quiet. But that space you're standing in, the one that feels like loss, is often the beginning of your elevation. The lack of friends, the distance, the solitude, it's not a punishment, it's preparation. You're being positioned, not abandoned. When everything around you starts falling away, it's usually because something within you is being rebuilt. You're not in a downfall, you're in a refining phase, and what's being stripped from you isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to make room for what's next. You start noticing how people disappear when your purpose starts surfacing. The ones who used to call often grow quiet when you begin focusing on your goals. The invitations stop coming when your habits start changing. You no longer fit into the conversations that revolve around complaining, gossip, or pretending to be happy. You start seeing life differently, and that difference separates you. You're shedding old versions of yourself that were built on pleasing others. And that kind of change can feel lonely. But that loneliness is sacred. It's where you meet the strongest parts of yourself. It's where you begin to understand that isolation is sometimes the classroom of transformation. In that quiet space, you start realizing what connection really means. It's not about how many people surround you, but about who can sit with you in silence without needing to fill it. It's not about who likes your posts or who texts you first, but who genuinely wants to see you grow, even when your growth makes them uncomfortable. When you're being elevated, you'll notice that temporary people can't breathe in permanent atmospheres. They were meant for the old version of your story, not the new one. The separation is necessary so that your environment matches your evolution. If everyone could come with you, the journey wouldn't require faith. There comes a point when you stop fighting the distance and start trusting it. You start understanding that the friends who leave during your transformation are not enemies. They're reminders that growth demands release. You can't take everything with you. Not every person you love is meant to understand this new version of you. Some people are lessons, not lifetimes. And while that truth can sting, it also sets you free. It gives you permission to stop chasing what's no longer aligned with your peace. You begin to see that the things falling apart are actually falling into place. What looked like rejection was simply redirection towards something higher, something purer, something real. You learn that being alone doesn't mean being forgotten. It means being prepared. Every quiet night, every unanswered call, every moment that felt empty was building something inside you. You were learning to depend on your own strength, to hear your own intuition, to trust your own decisions. You were being trained to walk without constant reassurance. You were learning to stand in your own presence without needing validation. That kind of preparation can't happen in crowded spaces. It happens in silence, where your spirit can hear what your next season requires. And the people who are meant to walk with you in that next chapter, they will meet you on higher ground. They will understand your silence instead of taking it personally. They will celebrate your boundaries instead of testing them. They will bring peace instead of pressure. But they can only find you when you rise to where you're called to be, not where you used to stand. That's why separation is sacred. It's the clearing before the connection. It's the pause before the promise. It's the stillness before the shift. And while it might feel like you're losing everything, what's really happening is that you're being made ready for the kind of friendships, opportunities, and love that match the person you're becoming, not the one you've outgrown. When your circle gets smaller, something deep inside you begins to shift. You stop measuring your worth by how many people reach out, how many plans you're invited to, or how full your weekends look. You start realizing that not every empty space needs to be filled. There's strength in choosing stillness instead of forcing connection. The lack of friends begins to teach you something that constant company never could: how to be enough for yourself. It becomes a mirror that shows you what parts of you were built on needing others to make you feel valuable. And as that reflection gets clearer, you begin to rebuild your identity, not around who accepts you, but around who you truly are when no one's watching. You start noticing that your time alone feels different now. It doesn't sting the same way it used to. There's a calmness to it, a sense of control. You begin to enjoy mornings without messages, nights without distractions, weekends without validation. You find a rhythm in your own presence. You learn to take yourself out, to think deeply, to sit in silence without feeling like something's missing. Because nothing is missing. You just stopped confusing noise for connection. You begin to see that what you once called loneliness was really detox. You were cleansing your spirit from constant comparison, from people who didn't value you, from patterns that kept you from peace. This season teaches you to listen more than you speak. You start paying attention to the quality of energy that surrounds you. You become more selective with who you give access to. You realize that every conversation has power. It either builds or breaks something inside you. So you start protecting your peace with intention. You stop oversharing. You stop chasing closeness with people who don't reciprocate it. You stop trying to convince others of your worth because you've already proven it to yourself through how you've endured, grown, and adapted. This silence becomes a shield. It guards your growth. It keeps your mind uncluttered, your emotions stable, your focus sharp. And as you spend more time by yourself, you start noticing subtle changes. You respond slower to things that used to trigger you. You forgive quicker, not because others deserve it, but because holding on disrupts your balance. You become more aware of who drains you and who restores you. You learn that it's not selfish to walk away from people who constantly misunderstand your peace as arrogance. You realize that you don't owe access to everyone. Just because you're kind, you begin to understand that maturity often looks like distance, and healing often looks like solitude. This kind of transformation can't happen when you're surrounded by constant noise. It needs quiet. It needs stillness. It needs you. You start seeing relationships differently. You stop expecting others to fill the spaces within you that only self-awareness can reach. You stop blaming people for leaving when you finally understand that not everyone is meant to walk with you through every season. Some people were bridges, meant to get you from one version of yourself to the next. And once you cross, they fade into the distance. That's not betrayal. It's completion. You stop clinging to what's ending and start trusting what's beginning. Because somewhere in the silence, you realize that what you thought was a lack of friends was really an invitation to rebuild your foundation, to learn what connection truly means, what loyalty really feels like, and what love actually looks like when it's not forced or conditional. So if you've found yourself in a season where the phone doesn't ring as much, where the room feels quieter, where you sometimes question why certain people drifted away, don't rush to fill that silence. Sit in it. Because that silence is not rejection, it's revelation. It's showing you who you are without the noise, without the crowd, without the need to be everything for everyone. It's revealing what peace feels like when it isn't shared, what strength feels like when it stands alone, and what growth looks like when it's unseen. The lack of friends doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're being rebuilt. You're being shaped into someone who no longer settles for shallow company just to avoid the sound of your own thoughts. What feels like isolation is often the invitation to evolve. You're being reminded that your value isn't measured by how many people surround you, but by how deeply you understand yourself when no one else is there to mirror you. You're learning to find comfort in your own silence, confidence in your own choices, and healing in your own presence. That's not loneliness. That's transformation. Because once you learn to stand tall in your solitude, the right people will recognize you not by your need for attention, but by your peace. They'll meet you in that calm, in that clarity, in that new version of you that no longer chases but attracts. So, the lack of friends means something deeper. It means you're in a sacred in-between where the old is fading and the new hasn't fully formed yet. It's the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. It's the divine pause where you learn to hear your own voice, trust your own path, and build a life that doesn't depend on applause. And when you reach the other side, you'll realize you never lost anyone. You just gained yourself.